when something awful happens, rather than just treating symptoms with, that could be pharmaceuticals. And that was the one where kind of all the problems were around. It was a worried one, that was the anxious one. And I knew something had to change. Welcome to episode 1 of Reflecting Health podcast. My name's Jackie. I'll be your host. I am the founder of Reflecting Health, a physiotherapist and a health enthusiast. I love looking at health and learning all the different ways that we can be healthy, and what is the root cause of illness, what is the root cause of mental health issues, physical health issues, and all of these kinds of things. Today, in this podcast episode, I just wanted to go through a bit of an overview of what I think health is, what can bring you good health, what we do at Reflecting Health, what our focus is and what our strengths are, and go from there. So health, for me, it really starts as a spiritual kind of thing, as a spiritual journey. So the first, I guess, adventure that I had, it kind of started when my health was at its worst. And I think that's where a lot of people's health journey starts, is when something awful happens, or your health just gets to a point, either your mental health or your physical health gets to a point where you can no longer keep walking down the path that you're on, and something has to change. And I think that's what catalyzes a lot of people's health journey, and it's certainly what catalyzed mine. Someone very close to me had an awful health episode, and at that same time, my health was terrible. I had chronic fatigue. I had periods of time where I could barely get out of bed and even just take my son for a little walk outside, and I knew something had to change. And for me, well, I suppose actually the first thing that changed was my physical health habits, but a lot of my lifestyle habits had to change as well, because they were not supporting good health. I always thought I had a really good diet, but I also drank too much. I was also in my 20s, and I smoked a little bit, and I did things that were not really great for good health. So my journey started by getting onto hair tissue mineral analysis and functional medicine, really cleaning up my diet, really cleaning up my lifestyle, and really cleaning up my habits. So rather than keeping busy all the time, doing things, I slowed down. I had more space, I had more quiet time, and just doing those really simple things was incredibly healing for me, and that's what catalyzed a very transformational journey in my life. Not too long after that, I started to explore spirituality and journaling. I discovered there were two parts of myself, particularly when I was journaling. So during writing, I noticed when I was writing, it was like there was two people inside of me. And sometimes one person would be writing, and sometimes the other person would be writing. And one person was very wise, saw the big picture, everything was okay, everything was loving, just this beautiful sort of soul that would come through. The other one, not so much. That was the jealous one. That was the angry one. That was the sad one. That was the cynical one. And that was the one where kind of all the problems were around. It was a worried one. That was the anxious one. And I noticed these two kind of voices that came out of me. And that was a really pivotal point in my journey, was to sort of notice, okay, in what state am I in? From what person am I acting through or talking through right now? Am I talking through the voice of wisdom and truth and reason? Or am I talking through this emotional sort of person, my more egoic sort of state. So that was a huge part of my journey and has influenced the way that I sort of make decisions. Making sure journaling and trying to discern, okay, where am I? Is this truth, or is this just some sort of convoluted story I'm telling myself? And, it could be either one. So my physical journey and my spiritual journey were all very, very important to my own healing from chronic fatigue, from depression, anxiety, from feeling really stuck, from just kind of going in circles and getting nowhere in life. They were all really important things that I sort of discovered and had a bit of a journey through. And I sort of touched on too, lifestyle was really, really key to that too, which is basically, and it took many years, and this is an ongoing thing for me, transforming my life so that each element within it is something that I'm proud of and something that I love. So for example, the place that I live, the house that I live in, is that a place that I love going home to? Now I can say yes, that wasn't always the case. Are the friendships in my life friendships that inspire me? Beautiful people that I love. The relationships in my life, are they relationships that are people that I love, that are good for me, that lift me up and that are there for me and not kind of bringing me down? And, your family relationships and family sort of ties and things like that too. So there's many, many, many aspects of life that tie into health and tie into our mental health and into our well-being. And it's not like you can click your fingers and make everything better all at once. This is all a super, super slow journey. And I don't think it ever stops. There's no finish line or finishing place that you get to in your life where you go, oh, I'm done now. I have achieved the pinnacle of where I can get to for this thing in my life. I'm finished. I've reached the top of my physical health. I couldn't possibly get any healthier. That's it. I've reached the finish line. I'm enlightened now. I'm done. It's the finish line. There's no finish line for any of this. I don't think so anyway. I believe that these are things that we just continue to work on throughout our entire life. We continue to evolve these things. We continue to implement habits and supportive things in our life that, makes all of these areas better and better and better. And what kind of served me at one point in my life may no longer serve me at another point in my life. So things come and go, friendships can come and go. Where you live could change as well. Life is a living, kind of breathing, changing thing. And it's always sort of evolving, and we're always evolving with life. So that's kind of just a bit of an overview of my view of health and well-being, and a little bit of a sprinkle of my own journey. I'd love to talk a little bit about reflecting health and what we do here. So for a while now, so I started the business in 2019, and initially it was very sort of, I would say, standard physio sort of practice work, which is well and good, and I loved that, and that was good at the time, but I didn't really have my passions intertwined with the business. So I was very interested in health and wellness and functional medicine. Functional medicine being the main philosophy is to find the root cause of disease and illness, rather than just treating symptoms with, that could be pharmaceuticals, that could be supplements, that could be whatever, that you're just treating symptoms with. Functional medicine aims to find the root cause of what's causing things. So that was a big passion of mine. I was very interested in functional medicine and did study that. And I was also very passionate about spirituality, because that had been a massive impact for me and a big impact in my own journey. And so having some sort of element within the work that I do of spirituality. So in particular, journaling was a massive tool that I used. I learned that from a man called Jason Reynolds from the Quantum Movement. He's very amazing and was a fantastic mentor to me for a few years. Highly recommend his programs. So initially when we started the business, it was sort of, it didn't kind of encompass these passions of mine. And over the years, the business has sort of grown into what it is now. And more recently, we're sort of really leaning into those passions. So we now have physio, speech, and OT services, but we're all very much leaning towards providing sort of functional medicine services, which is highly sort of nutrition-based, lifestyle-based, getting rid of toxins in your house, toxins in your environment, things like that. And I think there's a lot of confusion out there too about what's healthy and what's not. So I think it's important to sort of cut out the grey and say, look, this is what has been shown to be really good, and this has not been shown to be really, really good too. So having an element of functional medicine, but also we're all very much into our neurological fields too. So there's a fantastic program by Dr. Robert Melillo, and he has a program called Brain Balancing. Now, this is so fascinating. It's my new obsession. He talks about the hemispheres of the brain, and that there can be a functional disconnection between the hemispheres. So if when we were developing in the uterus and as babies, if there was anything that kind of impacted that development, it could be a physical issue, it could be an emotional trauma, whatever's sort of impacted that brain development, could be in the brainstem or anywhere in the brain, then we can have this sort of functional disconnection, and we won't have integration of our primitive reflexes. And we may have a dominance in different areas of the brain and in underdeveloped areas of the brain too. So by stimulating these underdeveloped areas, and maybe by toning down some of the overdeveloped areas, we can create more coherence in the brain and the hemispheres talking to each other again. And this has implications to basically anything that the brain controls, which is pretty much anything. So things like mental health, anxiety, depression, also any sort of neurodiversity, so ADHD, autism, dyslexia, those sorts of things can have their roots underlying in this functional disconnection and an overactivity in one of the hemispheres. So by doing some motor sensory exercises, we can really balance that up. Really fascinating. But a lot of other things too, physical issues, all of the tone in our muscles comes from our brain. So if we balance up the brain, that can help with physical issues too. A fascinating example of that is if somebody has a stroke in their brain, often one side of their body can be heavily impacted by that. So that's just a bit of an example of how the body is very much impacted by the brain and what happens there. So we have our functional medicine, we have our brain balancing aspects of the business, and we've also tied in some spirituality there. So in September, we're launching our first Functional Foundations program, and that will encompass the functional medicine, the brain balancing, and with a bit of journaling and some higher concepts sort of intertwined within that as well. So that is my 10,000 foot overview of health, of reflecting health. I hope it's been a really great introduction to me, to the business, to what we do. The intention with this podcast is to learn more about health, learn more about others. Hopefully we can get some great interviews as well, and just continue to evolve in this area. So hopefully you've enjoyed it. Thank you.